President Trump showcases his Made in America initiative, but he's also focused on getting a GOP health care bill across the finish line, tweeting about continuing questions about that Russian meeting and having to deal with an aggressive Iran that announced the jailing of an American graduate student ahead of a big U.S. decision. This is Special Report. Good evening. Welcome to Washington. We don't usually start like that, but I'm Bret Baier. The Republican effort to repeal and replace Obamacare has encountered another roadblock. President Trump is also once again lashing out on Twitter over fake news and the very real controversy over his campaign's alleged ties to Russia. But we start with news that Iran has sentenced a Chinese-American graduate student to prison for spying. That graduate student from a top American university is looking at 10 years in an Iranian prison tonight. That sentence comes on a day President Trump is supposed to decide on a key matter concerning the nuclear deal with the Islamic Republic, a decision that could come at any minute. Correspondent Rich Edson is at the State Department tonight. Good evening, Rich.
Good evening, Brett, and we expect that official decision shortly. This is as Princeton University says that student was in Iran conducting research for his Ph.D. Iran says he assumed the role of a student so that he could infiltrate their national archives and send sensitive information back to the West. Iran arrested this student, a 37-year-old graduate student, last summer, Shuwei Wang. That's according to the university. It is this provocative behavior the U.S. says continues 2 years after the previous administration signed a nuclear deal with Iran and several other countries. Congress requires the administration to certify every 90 days whether Iran is complying with that agreement. The latest deadline is today. The State Department says the U.S. will continue complying with the nuclear agreement while it reviews the entire U.S. policy towards Iran. President Trump opposes the Iran deal, though Iran has already received tens of billions of dollars in unfrozen assets as part of the agreement, and restoring international sanctions against Iran could be difficult. The White House says the State Department will release the administration's decision today. State refuses to say when it will exactly do so. It is also unclear when the Trump administration will conclude its full policy review of the Iran policy that the U.S. has. Brett?
Rich, also a high-level meeting with the Russians at the State Department this afternoon.
That's right. A meeting here between two top diplomats that the U.S. Had been suspended. The Russians had suspended it. It's back on now. This is the first of now what they're hoping will be continued regular meetings. Russia has said it wants these two diplomatic compounds back, one in New York, one in Maryland, seized in the previous administration for interference in the election and intelligence activities. Sergei Lavrov, he is the Russian foreign minister. He said today, quote, "It is robbery in broad daylight. I am confident that there are men of sense in the Trump administration who are perfectly aware that the decision to seize the diplomatic property and eject 35 diplomats with their families was taken by the Obama administration in a state of agony. The Obama administration also ejected nearly 36 Russian diplomats and banned them from those compounds over what it says was intelligence activities and interference in the election. Russia also faces the possibility of additional sanctions. The House is considering a bill the Senate overwhelmingly passed that would strengthen sanctions against Russia and require some congressional approval if the administration tries to lift any Russian sanctions. But there are objections from the administration. Secretary of State Rex Tillerson has said he wants the flexibility in those sanctions in his dealings with Russia. He also points to the communications channels he has open with the Russians and wouldn't want them to close them off. That ongoing on the Hill between the administration and lawmakers now.
Okay, Rich, we'll wait for that statement from the State Department any moment about Iran. Thank you. While critics believe the Russia scandal is drowning out the president's efforts to focus on other issues, don't tell President Trump that. He's trucking right along, pushing American goods at home and abroad, but bringing new questions about his own companies. Correspondent Kristen Fisher reports from the White House tonight. Good evening, Kristen.
Good evening, Brett. You know, all day today, President Trump has been pressuring companies across the country to make more products right here in the United States. But that effort is being met by claims of hypocrisy from his critics.
A splashy display on the south lawn of the White House.
products made in all 50 states, like Caterpillar construction equipment made in Illinois and fire trucks made in Wisconsin.
We will protect our workers, promote our industry, and be proud of our history because we will put America first. America will be first again. We will make America great again.
It's all part of the White House's week-long push to show how the president's efforts to roll back regulations and reform the tax code could help American companies manufacture more products here in the U.S. Problem is, many of the president's own products are made overseas, like shirts and glasses made in China and suits made in countries like Indonesia and Mexico. At the off-camera briefing today, the White House press secretary declined to comment on the president's own companies, saying it would be inappropriate for him to do so.
What's really important is the president's agenda, regulatory relief and tax relief, are focused on trying to make sure that all companies can hire here, can expand here, can manufacture here.
Yet once again, what's really important to this administration is being overshadowed by near daily revelations about Russia. Today, President Trump continued to defend his son and his decision to meet with that Russian attorney to get dirt on Hillary Clinton during the campaign. Quote, most politicians would have gone to a meeting like the one Don Jr. attended in order to get info on an opponent. That's politics. Over the weekend, a new defense emerged from Mr. Trump's personal legal team, aimed squarely at the men and women who protect the president and his family.
Well, I've wondered why the Secret Service, if this was nefarious, why did the Secret Service allow these people in? The president had Secret Service protection at that point. That raised a question with me.
In a rare move, the Secret Service is now defending itself in a statement. Quote, Donald Trump Jr. was not a protectee of the U.S. Secret Service in June 2016. Thus, we would not have screened anyone he was meeting with at that time. As Congress and the special counsel continue to investigate, new data on just how much this scandal is hurting his nearly 6-month-old presidency. According to a new ABC News Washington Post poll, 63% of the people polled said it was inappropriate for Donald Trump Jr., Jared Kushner, and then campaign chairman Paul Manafort to attend this meeting. Just 26% said it was appropriate. As for the president, his approval rating has hit a record low, just 36%. But support among his base seems to be holding steady. A new NBC News Wall Street Journal poll found his approval rating in counties he won in November is 50%. That's a 10-point jump over the last month. And this Made in America theme will likely play very well with his base, culminating with the president presiding over the commissioning of a brand new aircraft carrier, the USS Gerald R. Ford in Newport News, Virginia, this Saturday. Brett?
Kristen Fisher live on the North Lawn. Kristen, thank you. The Republican crusade to get rid of Obamacare will have to wait at least a week. The GOP Senate leadership needs every vote it can get just to put the measure up for debate on the Senate floor. And one of those potential yes votes is sitting at home tonight dealing with his own health care issues. So now what? Chief Congressional Correspondent Mike Emanuel fills us in from Capitol Hill.
We hope John McCain gets better very soon because we miss him. He's a crusty voice in Washington. Plus, we need his vote.
Administration officials say President Trump has been working the phones and will meet with some senators at the White House this evening. This was expected to be the big week on Capitol Hill until Arizona Senator John McCain was sidelined by surgery to remove a blood clot above his left eye. Sources say McCain is in good spirits but will be out at least a week, and doctors don't want him to fly.
He'll be back with us soon.
So Majority Leader Mitch McConnell announced over the weekend consideration of the bill would be deferred, needing McCain's vote in order to proceed.
We're continuing to work to get all 50 votes. The CBO score will come out in a day or so. They were rushed to try to get it back today.
A key point person for the Trump administration in getting health care reform done took this preemptive strike at the analysis.
CBO doesn't even capture those individuals who say to the federal government, I don't want the plan that you think I need. I want the plan that I know I need for myself and for my family.
Barrasso notes leadership is trying to strike a delicate balance.
Some's concerned that it goes too far. Some concerns it doesn't go far enough. We need to return control to the American people, get the decisions out of Washington.
Kentucky Senator Rand Paul says he's a no and argues the bill doesn't fix the, quote, death spiral of Obamacare.
I'm not willing to trade Medicaid reform for an insurance company bailout, an insurance company entitlement. They called a temporary stabilization fund of nearly $200 billion.
Maine Senator Susan Collins is taking aim at a proposal by Texas Senator Ted Cruz to allow folks who want them to buy cheaper plans.
The Cruz plan is unworkable. It would result in undermining the protections for people with pre-existing conditions.
And Democrats continue saying the bill would have a devastating impact.
They're talking about taking away nursing home care, taking away care for children. It's shocking. And when the public looks at this, they go, wait a minute. This is not about politics. This is about my family.
Concessions have been made, what Democrats are calling the polar payoff to win over Alaska Senator Lisa Murkowski, the Bayou bailout for Louisiana Senator Bill Cassidy, and the Sunshine sellout for Florida Senator Marco Rubio.
That's not unusual, but since Republicans made a big deal out of it with Obamacare, now Democrats are enjoying returning the favor. Brett?
A lot of alliteration there. Mike Emanuel live on Capitol Hill. Mike, thanks. Republicans may actually be getting closer to an Obamacare repeal and replace bill. No matter what you see, hear, or read, senior political analyst Bret Hume has some thoughts about that. Good evening, Bret. So you say you're saying there's a chance.
Well, look at it this way, Brett. About 3 weeks ago, when this initial Senate measure was first presented, within a matter of days, we had 4 hard no's we knew about, and another 6 members who had expressed severe reservations. So they might all have as many as 10 no votes. So the second version comes out just a few days ago, and we now have 2, holding at 2 hard no votes, which tells you that real progress toward getting the thing passed has been made. It doesn't mean it's going to pass, but it's so close now, Brett, that when it gets down to it, it's probably going to pass, 50-50 with a tie-breaking vote from the vice president. That if one of the members, a third member, votes no and sinks the bill, that member will go into the 2018 election, which may be what he or she is afraid of, having cast the bill that will universally be seen by Republicans as having been the vote that saved Obamacare. Now, look, there are going to be political headaches from the bill itself, but I think it's a pretty good argument that the headaches from being the one who saved Obamacare for any Republican senator would be worse.
So there's a group that we know are concerned about the current version, and they may be waiting for the Congressional Budget Office to weigh in with the official score. But it seems like the leadership and the administration are trying to make this a binary choice.
Well, and when you get down to it, as a practical matter, that's what it is, because if this fails, it means that we've hit the legislative end of the road. The chances of reviving some other version of this, getting it through the Senate, and then, of course, back through the House again, I would call extremely remote at this stage. And, of course, there's a whole train of other legislative matters they're trying to get to. They need to get this out of the way. It has budgetary impacts that help some of the legislation that's coming behind it. So this is probably the end of it. It means Obamacare lives as is, unreformed, basically unchanged. And some Republican out there, some individual Republican, probably won't be more than one, because that's what we look like we're down to, will be the one who did it. Do you want to be that person? If you were a Republican, would you want to be that person? So in an odd way, the very closeness of the vote, in an odd way, may help to get that final vote they need, to hold that final vote in place.
It seems like Senator Rand Paul wants to be that person.
Well, Rand Paul operates in a different category. Rand Paul is he would hate this, but if you're looking for somebody who could be called a Republican in name only, that is to say somebody who is not a team player, he would be it. Now, I'm sure he has a following that says he's standing for principle. I'm not sure exactly how it supports your principles to be the one who sinks the effort to repeal Obamacare, but he seems able to occupy that territory, and he's comfortable with it. I don't think they can get him, and I don't think they can get Susan Collins either. So they got to hold everybody else. I think they got a chance to do so. It's by no means guaranteed, but I think there's a real chance.
Well, what about the dust up over these deals that some of these moderates are getting, it appears, to kind of carve out their states? It was a big story, obviously, during Obamacare, during those final days.
It was a big story, and it was kind of embarrassing to some members, but the question about that is, will those deals help the bill pass or hurt its chances? I think they may be embarrassing, but I think on balance, deals like that tend to help the bill's chances, because it gives the member something to take home and say, yeah, I know you people back home here are worried about X. Well, this is what I got to fix X.
Finally, we cover all the developments about the latest Russia investigation. Obviously, a lot of talk over the weekend about that Russian meeting and all of the explanations. Right. Is there a point where this administration is going to get everything together and get it out? It seems like there's kind of a continual focus.
Further. Well, I don't think the additional revelations about who was in the meeting with Donald Trump Jr. have really moved the ball very much. But it had been better if when he put out his emails to indicate everybody who was there. But the administration needs to learn the lesson that when something needs to be put out there, you're going to have to stand the reaction to. Get it all out. That almost always works better. But perhaps they'll learn that. The real question is, Brett, not about this meeting, in my opinion. The question is whether there'll be further meetings and patterns and evidence of contact, communication, and collaboration. If that happens, all bets are off. The administration is in dire straits. So far, we haven't seen that.
All right, Brett. Thank you.
You bet.
The Pentagon could get more money than President Trump asked for under the terms of a new defense bill approved by the House, but there are still plenty of disagreements about what to do with that money. Correspondent Peter Ducey is on Capitol Hill tonight with that story.
Congress has a message for the military. Don't just get ready to defend against rising terror threats. Also get ready to defend against rising sea levels and global warming.
We would be remiss in our efforts to protect our national security to not fully account for the risk climate change poses to our bases, our readiness, and to the fulfillment of our armed forces mission.
Stefanik is one of 46 Republicans who voted with Democrats to keep language in the defense budget that funds a study about the ways climate change makes the U.S. military vulnerable. Another Republican, Congressman Scott Perry, had been pushing an amendment that would let scientific agencies take the lead on climate change and keep the Pentagon out of it.
We ought to let combatant commanders, we ought to let the men and women that wear the uniform and defend our country focus on the enemy.
But the global warming language stayed in the House bill to the dismay of some defense experts.
We don't have enough ships, we don't have enough tanks, we don't have enough soldiers, and now we're spending money on studies for climate change around the world in the Department of Defense. It makes no sense whatsoever.
Another budget fight was over military money going toward gender transition. Some Republicans say they fear the recovery time from some surgeries could keep soldiers sidelined too long, impacting readiness.
Surgical costs alone can top $1.3 billion over the next 10 years. These resources could fund 13 F-35 aircraft to fight near-peer adversaries like China and Russia.
But Democrats don't think it's fair to single out transgender service members.
It wouldn't just, first of all, target transgender surgery. It would target some of the hormone drugs, which cost like $100 a year, cost virtually nothing to the military.
Since lawmakers came through with more cash than the commander-in-chief requested, defense planners are expected to be able to do their jobs the way they want.
The good news about the NDA is that it's got $37 billion in it over the president's submission. That is astounding that they've been able to accomplish that. This is good news.
One Republican member of Congress just walked through the hallway here, still kind of shaking their head, wondering how some of the things in this defense bill make the military more lethal or make the military more ready. But the bill passed the House, so it is on its way to the Senate, where Majority Leader Mitch McConnell says they will consider it at the first part of August, since they cut back their recess. Brett.
Peter Ducey, live on the Hill. Peter, thank you. The TSA has lifted a ban on passengers of Saudi Arabian Airlines from taking laptops and other large electronics on board U.S.-bound flights. The airline was the last under those restrictions. Last month, U.S. officials announced new security requirements for all airlines. Up next, an Afghan man who saved the lives of American service members in his country comes to his new home. First, here's what some of our Fox affiliates around the country are covering tonight. Fox 10 in Phoenix with the tragic aftermath of a flash flood that left at least 9 people dead. A 13-year-old boy is still missing tonight. A storm unleashed 6-foot-high floodwaters into a popular swimming area. Authorities recovered the bodies of 5 children and 4 adults. Fox 32 in Chicago as a 9-year-old boy is among 10 people killed in Chicago area shootings this weekend. That makes almost 2,000 shooting victims in that city this year. 349 of those have died in Chicago. And this is a live look at Austin, Texas from our affiliate Fox 7. The big story there tonight, teachers from across the state gather at the Capitol to rally for public education. Among the issues they're addressing, the governor's plan for a teacher pay raise. There's concern about how local school districts will pay for that pay raise. Teachers are also voicing opposition to vouchers for private school tuition and a bill that would prevent schools from deducting union dues from teacher paychecks. That's tonight's live look outside the Beltway from Special Report. We'll be right back. South Korea is offering to begin talks with North Korea over border tensions and family reunions. It's the first outreach since the inauguration in May of new President Moon Jae-in, who has offered to meet with North Korean leader Kim Jong-un if certain conditions are met. There's been no response yet from North Korea. Not all the heroes during American involvement in Middle Eastern conflicts are Americans. Tonight, a man from Afghanistan is in the U.S., about to embark on a new life after saving the lives of dozens of American troops. National security correspondent Jennifer Griffin has the story tonight from the Pentagon.
The soldiers he served with called him Fred. Fredoon Akhtari participated in more than 500 combat missions, translating for the U.S. military for the past 13 years in Afghanistan. Sergeant Ryan Craig and 25 members of the Pennsylvania National Guard and the veteran charity No One Left Behind greeted him at the airport, recalling how Fred saved all of their lives.
Completely cut off, no air support, limited artillery support, and throughout the entire battle, Fred was just redirecting us. Hey, they're going to come from the east side, they're going to come from the west side, you know what I mean? You guys need to shift fire this way. And just giving us that valuable, actionable intelligence that single-handedly kept all of us safe.
So he saved your lives?
Absolutely, 100%.
It took them 5 years of pushing an entrenched U.S. government bureaucracy to get him a special immigrant visa to the U.S. and out of harm's way.
So a death threat was placed on his life, and they put a note on his father's door, and they said, "We know what your son is doing. He will be captured alive, and he will die like no other."
Former FBI agent Dave Lemoyne flew in from Omaha, Nebraska, where he will help settle Fred and his family. Fred helped the FBI capture and kill top Taliban leaders.
They shot my car 2 times with RPG. They shoot me many times, but they couldn't kill me. They sent a threat letter to my family a few times, but they couldn't kill me.
Asked how he felt to finally be in America?
My wife and my kids, they're happy to hear. I hope my kids should grow up in a society like America, to study hard and be a human. For these guys, I don't know what to say.
These soldiers set up a GoFundMe page to buy his ticket because it would have taken another 6 months to wait for the State Department.
He's the poster child for the Special Immigrant Visa Program. He put in 10 years of service getting blown up by IEDs. He was in over 100 firefights.
They put their life on the line for us, and I believe we should just do everything we can to help them out.
There are 14,000 Afghan translators who have served since 9/11 still waiting for special immigrant visas. Escaping the Taliban and making it to America, where the cost of living is high, is just the beginning.
There are guys sleeping under bridges that should be in apartments, and we're breaking our promise to these guys.
No One Left Behind is lobbying Congress to give honorary veteran status to these Afghan and Iraqi combat interpreters who risk their lives for the U.S. government. They don't want government handouts. They want to work.
We're not asking for Title 34 or VA benefits. This is an honorary title that will allow 56,000 501c3 nonprofits to use their money for our new veterans.
They want Congress to increase the quota of SIV visas in the Defense Authorization Act. They believe in the soldiers' creed, leave no one behind. In Washington, Jennifer Griffin, Fox News.
American officials say the Trump administration is finalizing plans to revamp the nation's military command for offensive and defensive cyber operations. That's according to the Associated Press. Under the plan, the U.S. Cyber Command would eventually split off from the National Security Agency. It is an effort that began under the Obama administration. Current Defense Secretary Jim Mattis has endorsed much of that plan, but debate over details has dragged on for months. President Trump's chief of Veterans Affairs has removed 2 top officials from New Hampshire's only Veterans Hospital. The Boston Globe reports a review has been ordered for Manchester VA Medical Center. Physicians and employees say the facility was endangering patients with conditions such as a fly-infested operating room and surgical instruments that were not always sterilized. More and more veterans are getting an opportunity to go someplace other than a VA hospital for treatment. They do not have to pay, and the government is not picking up the tab. Correspondent Casey Stiegel explains tonight from Dallas.
This is not a sign of weakness, reaching out and getting help.
After 21 years served in the U.S. Navy and multiple deployments, retirement from the military didn't come as easy for Jeff Hensley or his family.
I think what I was most shocked was my older son, because he kind of bore the brunt of most of my deployment and my time away.
Hensley says he was in a dark place, had sought help from traditional avenues like the VA, yet nothing had really worked. Then he heard about a private program called Cohen Veterans Network and met Dr. Amy Williams.
We've had a really good first year.
Williams is the clinical director at Cohen's North Texas location near Dallas. It's one of more than 5 offices up and running around the country, with 4 more scheduled to open in the coming months from D.C. to Denver.
So tell me how you've been feeling.
Their focus is mental health, and they don't believe in making people wait to see a professional.
When people call the clinic, we can offer them an appointment within a week, and so there's not really a waiting time.
Treatment at Cohen is also free, entirely funded through private donations. But perhaps the largest draw to many clients?
We're serving families. We'll serve families regardless of whether the veteran is involved.
That means spouses and children can also take advantage of the free services, care that is not usually covered by the VA, yet something Jeff Hensley now understands his kids desperately needed in order for them to heal too.
It wouldn't happen if we hadn't come here.
Hensley says he applauds any efforts being made to improve the current VA system, but adds introducing private competition like Cohen only gives veterans and their families more options when it comes to getting the best care possible, something he says his comrades could greatly benefit from. Brett?
Casey Stiegel in Dallas. Casey, thank you. The Government Accountability Office, the GAO, says the State Department is not preparing its workers adequately for trouble overseas. GAO saying posts in places at greater risk for terrorism have completed just 44% of the drills required for crisis and evacuation preparedness. It says a review of emergency plans for 20 facilities found only 2 had updated all key sections. An American doctor is in England tonight to assist in the case of a terminally ill young boy whose parents want to take him to the U.S. for experimental treatment. Correspondent Benjamin Hall has the latest from London.
The battle to save little Charlie Gard rages on. Now his parents have been given hope as prominent American neurologist Dr. Michio Hirano of Columbia University has flown to London.
This is the world-class doctor on this disease. He's not doing this unless he thinks there's a chance of prolonging the child's life.
Dr. Hirano specializes in rare genetic conditions and has pioneered an experimental treatment he believes could help Charlie's muscular strength, with the chance of success between 11 and 56%. The High Court ruled in April that Charlie should be allowed to die with dignity, and other specialists have said treatment would only cause additional pain. But others disagree.
The whole medical establishment has been trying to stop Charlie Gard's parents taking that little lad to America to have treatment that is new and not available in the UK. None of us are trying to play God here, but what this is all about is 2 parents desperately doing their best to give that little boy one last chance.
The case has ignited a major fight over who has the right to choose a child's care, with objectors saying Britain's National Health Service, the NHS, should not intervene.
Whose child is it? Is it the state's child? Is it the NHS's child?
or does this child belong to the parents? And I would maintain it raises very profound moral and perhaps political questions as to who does a child belong to.
Another boy with the condition, Arturo Estopinan, has already been treated by Dr. Hirano. That was 6 years ago, and he's still alive and has seen improvements, though is still on a ventilator. Charlie's case is said to be more severe, but those who support his treatment, including President Trump, say even if there is a 1 in a million chance, it should be allowed. Brett?
Benjamin, thank you. Back here at home, stocks were mixed today. The Dow lost 8. The S&P 500 was down a fraction. The Nasdaq gained 2. The crisis in Venezuela. We'll get the latest from an American member of Congress who's one of the lawmakers leading the effort to address the situation in Caracas. That's next.
Algunos ciudadanos pues se resguardan. Escuchamos detonaciones en la avenida Sucre.
A 61-year-old woman was killed, 4 people wounded by gunfire at a polling site, the Western Caracas church in Venezuela Sunday. More than 7 million Venezuelans voted over the weekend in a referendum on their president's plan to rewrite the Constitution and consolidate government power. Today, opposition leaders are calling for more street protests and a strike later this week. Almost 100 people have died in demonstrations over the last 3 months in Venezuela. It's a story you need to hear about. Joining us to talk about it is Florida Congresswoman Ileana Ros-Lehtinen, who's leading an effort for sanctions and other measures to address this crisis in Caracas. She's with us live on Capitol Hill tonight. Congresswoman, thanks for being here.
No, Brett, thank you. You're one of the few journalists focusing on this crisis of democracy in Venezuela. Thank you for this coverage.
Well, thanks for being here. What your reaction to this weekend and what it means?
It was so wonderful to see Venezuelans in record numbers in every corner of the world go out and say no to Maduro and say yes to democracy, to having free and fair elections, to having the Constitution being respected. And I was at one of the sites at the University of Miami Coral Gables Center, and it was just amazing. Venezuelans, after being stepped on by Hugo Chavez and now Nicolas Maduro, who's just as bad as Chavez, and having communism stuffed down their throat, they're saying yes to democracy. So I was just enthused watching them get so happy. But the fight is just beginning. As you pointed out, Brett, over 100 people have been killed by Maduro's thugs. Hundreds and hundreds are in jail, political prisoners. Thousands have been injured in these street demonstrations. So the fight continues. Maduro's next plan is he's going to have some sham elections, as you say, to further consolidate his illegal power grab. Unbelievable.
So, let me put up some stats here about Venezuela. You mentioned 100 people dying in the opposition since April. Inflation rate in Venezuela, 800% at the end of 2016. 87% of the population said it didn't have enough money to buy necessary food. The GDP dropped 12% in 2016 after oil prices fell. And then by 2017, the country has owed $140 billion to foreign creditors. What does that mean for somebody in the U.S. sitting on the couch that maybe Congresswoman hasn't really been paying attention to this or has been inundated with other stories?
Well, that's why I'm so glad that you're covering this story. Venezuela, you've got to remember, all of you viewers, was one of the richest, most productive, most powerful countries, freest countries in all of Latin America. It was the breadbasket for Latin America. Now they don't even have wheat, they don't have milk, they don't have diapers, they don't have medicine. It's a basket case. So it went from a breadbasket to a basket case. Why? Because socialism and communism does not work. And so the people are saying, what is ahead for us? And that's why I respect what they're doing. They're demonstrating peacefully in the streets, but they're also going to the ballot boxes and they're saying yes. So they're doing everything. Now it's up to us in the United States to sanction those human rights abusers in Venezuela and say, I know you like to come to Disney World and visit Mickey Mouse. Well, guess what? If you trample on people's human rights, you're not going to be able to come to the U.S. We're going to freeze your bank accounts. We're going to confiscate your luxury condos and your yachts. And you decide, treat the people with respect, or you will not be able to come to the United States. Venezuelan human rights activists, they understand that these thugs love to come to the land of milk and honey, the United States. Let's not give them that privilege.
The White House was asked about this today. Sean Spicer, White House press secretary, had this to say about the weekend's events.
We congratulate the Venezuelan people for the huge turnout in the referendum yesterday and the unmistakable statement that they made, that they delivered to their government. We condemn the violence inflicted by government thugs against innocent voters and efforts by the government to erode democracy in Venezuela. We once again call for the Constituent Assembly of July 30th to be canceled and for free and fair elections to be scheduled.
You mentioned, Congresswoman, sanctions. Specifically, what can you do in Congress and what is realistic?
Well, I think President Trump has taken the correct approach. He's already put on the sanctions list of the members of the Supreme Court, the Venezuelan Supreme Court, who illegally have been placing these human rights activists and peaceful protesters in jail. And so what Maduro did is he cynically moved one of the greatest opposition leaders, Leopoldo Lopez, from a military jail where he should have never been there for 3 years. Over 3 years he's been rotting in jail, and he put him under house arrest. So he's still trying to oppress the peaceful dissent of the people. I think that the president was right in sanctioning these Supreme Court justices because he has packed the court. These are just thugs of Maduro. There's nothing judicial or tied to justice about these elements of the judicial system in Venezuela. We've got to do more of that. We're giving President Trump more names to sanction, and that's the way that we should operate, in a peaceful, democratic way in Venezuela and in the correct way here in the United States. Coming to the United States is a privilege. It's not a right. We should not allow people who violate human rights to come into our country.
Venezuela was 3.1% of the world's oil production last year, a 10th largest producer last year. Economically, how does this affect the U.S. potentially as that kind of devolves and that government really has some questions about its survival?
Well, we should not continue to buy oil from Nicolás Maduro. The United States, thankfully, is becoming more energy independent every day. We don't have to rely on the thugs of the world who before had us over a barrel. We are making our own energy. We shouldn't buy from all these terrible countries who use the money to oppress their own people. Let's make our own energy, and let's tell Nicolás Maduro, you give it away to the thugs in Cuba or Nicaragua, whatever you want to do, but we're not going to buy from you anymore.
Last thing, short answer, Congresswoman. Give me a worst case scenario and give me a best case scenario when it comes to Venezuela.
Worst case scenario, Maduro continues his power grab, jails all the human rights activists after his fake election at the end of this month, and continues to oppress the Venezuelan people, and they'll be starting to come in droves. They don't want to live there. There's no future for them there. We don't want that. We want them to stay in their country, in a free and democratic country. They deserve that.
And that's the best case scenario. A quick change.
That's the best case. Absolutely.
Congresswoman, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
Next up, the panel on President Trump's agenda and making America great again with American products. We'll analyze it all after the break.
Made in the USA. Remember in the old days, they used to have Made in the USA? No longer are we going to allow other countries to break the rules, steal our jobs, and drain our wealth. We must lower the tax on business, one of the highest in the world, and we must repeal job-killing Obamacare. We have to do that. We hope John McCain gets better very soon, because we miss him. He's a crusty voice in Washington. Plus, we need his vote.
I don't know how he takes the crusty voice. We'll see. We'll ask Senator McCain as he's recovering from surgery in Arizona. And the question is when he'll be back on that health care vote. This is we get some new polls about the president's job approval rating. Bloomberg poll on the approval rating, approve 40%, disapprove 56%. You can see the change there from December 2016. Monmouth out with a new poll, the approval at 39%, 52%. Interesting poll from the Wall Street Journal. They looked at the counties that voted for Donald Trump, and the approval, disapproval, and then the flip counties. These are counties that went for President Obama, then flipped to President Trump in this election. And there you see the disapprove, 51-44, and the surge counties. These are ones that surged to big numbers for Donald Trump, and you can see he's holding strong there, 56-40. Let's bring in our panel. Look at all the elements today. Michael Crowley, senior foreign affairs correspondent for Politico. Julie Pace, White House correspondent for the Associated Press. And Matthew Continetti, editor-in-chief of the Washington Free Beacon. Okay, Julie, today's push was buy and sell American. How much is that getting through?
Well, the White House is trying to make this the message. Really, they've been in this position where every time they feel like they've found their footing, every time they feel like they've hit a positive message, something on the Russia investigation overtakes it. And this is their attempt to be proactive. This is going to be a series of 3 weeks where they're going to be rolling out a theme. They have done this previously, I will say. There was an infrastructure week that was much maligned because we didn't really hear much about infrastructure. And I think it's important to note that every time the White House has one of these theme weeks and something gets overtaken, it's often because the president himself is throwing other issues on the table. So this will be the big challenge for them, not just whether they can stay on message in the press shop and whether they can hold events every day, but whether the president can restrain himself on Twitter in particular and keep other messages from overtaking this.
And this morning, the president tweeted about the Russian meeting with Donald Trump Jr. Most politicians would have gone to a meeting like the one Don Jr. attended in order to get info on an opponent. That's politics. Well, some Republicans are having a problem with it. Here's John Sununu on America's Newsroom.
The changing story is embarrassing. The changing story is stupid. The changing story is a mistake. But until the story change into a specific fact that makes it a violation, it looks horrible, but it's still not a violation of rule, regulation, law, or statute.
Michael, you look at those polls, and of course, Trump supporters may say, polls didn't work in the election. Why do they work now? But I found those counties really interesting. The flip counties, the surge counties, there's still strong support for the president, even in this environment where he's under siege.
Yeah, I mean, you can't say his poll numbers are good. His poll numbers are pretty bad. But you might have expected them by now to be worse. I mean, they really could be a lot worse. George W. Bush, in his second term, bottomed out at 25%. Trump has not, I haven't seen a single poll where he's broken into the 20s. Bush's second term average was 37%. So it's about where Trump is in some of these polls. Trump is above that. Now, Bush's second.
Bush dealt with Iraq and
Bush had a war where it was terrible. Every day we were seeing stories about more American soldiers killed. This was after Katrina. So real life, people were dying under the man's watch. It was rough sledding. And so Trump is faring better than that. And, it just goes to show this country is extremely divided. Some other polling I saw today, Brett, shows that only a very small number of Republicans believe that Russia even interfered in the election. I mean, I think increasingly Republicans are thinking that the entire Russia story is bogus. And I think that is really redounding to his benefit and keeping him from plunging down to those rock-bottom George W. Bush numbers.
I think we have Senator Tom Cotton on Donald Trump and Russia and this whole investigation. Take a listen.
I would dispute the premise of the question that the Trump administration has somehow been soft on Russia. If anything, the Trump administration has been much tougher on Russia. Was it naivete when Hillary Clinton pressed the reset button with Sergei Lavrov 6 months after Russia invaded Georgia? Was it appalling naivete and weakness when Barack Obama directed our ambassador in Ukraine, as their country was being invaded, to tell the government of that country to do nothing provocative to stop the Russians?
So, Matthew, the defense there is that they're doing tough stuff on Russia.
I guess Senator Cotton's saying that actions speak louder than words, and I think he has a point that other than the president's rhetoric and friendly tweets, when you get to the actual details of foreign policy, nothing has been done yet in order to really appease Vladimir Putin's government. Going back to the poll, though, I'd say the key number was the flip counties. This is what made Donald Trump president. These are the Trump Democrats, the Trump independents. And the number, the 40% number, has been stable for about 2 months. And what happened 2 months ago? Donald Trump fired Jim Comey. And I think there you see, with the Comey firing onward, he has been unable to get out of the Russia morass, and that's affected his approval among the kind of the soft Trump voters, Brett, the people who kind of voted for Donald Trump because he was, in their view, a better alternative than Hillary Clinton, but still aren't sold on him in the next coming years.
The line that it is drowning out his ability to move things, is that real?
I think that's part of what's happening here, but look, a lot of the actual action on policy is on the Hill right now, and you have a couple of dynamics that are happening. One, you have Republicans that, separate from Trump, are just uncomfortable with the health care bill that's on the floor right now for the Senate, and that is a policy matter. That's a concern about their own political future. But the reality is that the president doesn't have a ton of sway with some of these members. Someone like a Susan Collins from Maine, who has won as a moderate. Someone like Dean Heller from Nevada, who is staring down a tough re-election fight next year in one of the few battleground states that Hillary Clinton actually won. What can President Trump do to sway them if he's sitting at 40% in his approval rating? He doesn't have a lot of juice with those members. So, yes, it is drowning out his ability to get things done, but there are all these dynamics happening on the Hill that to some degree he's not going to be able to control.
We should point out that the president apparently is hosting some GOP senators at the White House tonight for dinner. More of that arm twisting, perhaps. But, Michael, I'm hearing that behind the scenes that a lot of big donors are putting the pressure on Republicans, saying you don't get something across the finish line and my wallet closes up really quickly.
Well, it just must be so frustrating for congressional Republicans when they have these majorities in the House and Senate. The Senate majority is narrow, admittedly, but they have a Republican president, and they should be scoring wins. In this kind of environment, George W. Bush had some important early legislative wins, including having, by this point, passed a huge tax cut of more than $1 trillion, and they're looking at going home for recess basically empty-handed. And I think that, Julie's right that the president has limited clout on Capitol Hill, but you have to think that it would be helpful for Republicans to have a unified message on the health care bill, pull up its numbers. This is not a popular piece of legislation. I will say that I did hear a counter-argument from somebody who said, actually, a health care bill is so complicated, so easy to attack, it might actually be better for Republicans that people are distracted and talking about something else because it prevents Democrats from punching more holes in it. So
more time does not help, perhaps.
More time may not help, but with the Russia story crowding out the attacks, maybe you're okay.
The key for Trump is his top issue, in which he has a large degree of support, is the economy and jobs. So one reason you have to get the health care vote done is you can move on to the tax cut, which I think the terrain will be much better for this president and the Republican Congress.
Might be still sticky to herd the cats around one plan.
But a better political fight.
Yeah.
Tax reform, not exactly an easy issue to take on.
But the whole premise, the thought about getting a W, how?
Look, that for Trump, that's more important than the policy detail. The idea, he said this, if Mitch McConnell can basically send a bill to his desk, he will sign it. That's what he's interested in, not the policy details.
We'll follow it all the way. Panel, thank you. When we come back, what a baby's first ice cream cone really looks like. Finally tonight, National Ice Cream Day was yesterday. Did you know that? Some people seem to be more excited about it than others. Take 9-month-old Emma, for example. Emma's grandmother treated her to her very first ice cream cone last month, but Emma would not even let her grandma get a bite in. She's very aggressive there. She is clearly an ice cream lover. The vanilla cone worked for Emma. Emma's mom posted the video to Facebook saying this was just a small portion of the mess she had to clean up. No word if they celebrated National Ice Cream Holiday yesterday or not. Grandma finally got a bite in there. Thanks for inviting us into your home tonight. That is it for this special report. Fair, balanced, and unafraid. The story, hosted by my colleague Martha McCall, starts right now.